Hello everybody and welcome back to the Safe App Dashboard where we now have the ability to create our own custom forms. In this video we will be doing just that, a start to finish process of building a very basic form, and we already have a PDF example that we can reference. So for this example we will be doing the truck tool inspection. The first thing we're going to want to do is navigate to the dashboard, select our forms menu and create new form. That'll bring up our form builder. Then we can start the process of building this custom form. The first thing I'm going to do is title it, so truck tool inspection, and then I'm going to position this in one of the available libraries. For this example, we're going to go with my co-op forms. Then I can bring in my inspection criteria and make sure that I am understanding the whole scope of the project before I start dragging and dropping different components. So we've got some headers, we've got some criteria, we have some instruction for providing photos and comments, and we want to be aware of all of that information before we start putting all of our components together. So the first thing I need to do is address the vehicle number, and I can do this a few different ways. One is inserting a basic text field, retitling it vehicle number, looking into my preview section, making sure I like it, and then clicking save. The other option is I can use the numbers function, and this is a feature that engages the user's number keypad instead of the whole keypad, so this might be a little bit easier to input the numeric value. Again, I can retitle it and press save. The last way of doing it is using a drop down. So if you would prefer that your users don't have any sort of engagement with a keypad, then you can use a drop down. And we'll start by retitling this to vehicle numbers. And then as we can see, there's no data input. So we'll go over to the data tab, and under each label, we can continue to add and input all of our vehicle numbers. So instead of having to type it in, this is just a click away. Once each of my vehicle numbers are in there, I can check the drop down, make sure it's how I like it, and click save. So those are the three ways you can have something as simple as a vehicle number display in the app. For this example, I'm just going to use one. So I'm going to use my remove button here and just make sure there's only one. Next is operator. Same thing, we can do this a million different ways, but for my example, I'll just have them type in their name. The next is the date component, and we know our forms automatically capture date, time, and location, so I can actually skip this component that used to be a manual operation. Next, I'm going to move to my first header. So I see unit clean and I see a question and criteria under it. So instead of doing single questions for all of these, I think a better way to manage it is actually to introduce field sets. So I'm going to drag in my container. I'm going to title it the header, which is unit clean. And then I'm going to drag and drop all of my components. So in this case, it's going to be a select option. So I'm going to use the boxes. I'm going to put in my criteria as the label, and then there's nothing to choose from yet, so I need to go back to my data tab, into my values table, and we have pass and fail as our two options. Remember, we can always use needs attention here too if we want it to show up red in our reports. Next, I see that there is an opportunity to take pictures and comments, so I'm going to drag over my file into my field set, retitle it to make sure we're collecting images, set my storage type to base64, and hit save. And then the next component is going to be a comments section. So I want a text area, which is larger, retitle it, and press save. Now I have all three features in one field set that represents one question. Since the layout of this form has pretty much the similar sort of layout for each question, I can basically just copy and paste or create a whole new field set. So I'm going to retitle this, press save, go into the question, change the criteria here. I also see we have an additional answer here called NA, so I'll need to go back in my data, add that answer as a selection, and press save. Now I can go through the rest of the form by copying and pasting these field sets instead of having to build them independently, And since they all have the same criteria for the most part, there's really limited edits that I'll be needing to make per question. So for time, I'm just going to continue to copy and paste in super fast mode and get to some of the other form components that we want to address before we publish this. Remember, I'm just copying and pasting the same field set over and over here and then adjusting any information that is particular to the question. So the title of the field set, the question content itself, and some of the answers are a little bit different. So now that we have all of our categories in place, there's something that I noticed on each one. They're all required in this form template. So to make ours required too, we're going to want to go into the edit function of the question that we want to make required. Then under validation, our first checkbox is called required. We want to check that and then hit save. We'll see the red star appear on those items as well. And so we can just go through and make all of our questions required. If you do this before you create all of your field sets, it'll copy and paste with it. But since I noticed this after the fact, I'll have to manually do it. The other option that I see is that paperwork is requiring 5 different pictures. So to make this a little bit easier, there's many things you can do, either just 5 opportunities to upload a picture, or you can have a little call to action with the title. So as we can see here, we're expecting 5 different things. We're probably going to need registration, insurance, accident investigation form, FMCSA manual, and maybe the operator's manual, or whatever 5 components your system requires. That way that it's a little bit more organized for the driver who's performing this inspection. Before saving or publishing it, I always like to do one last check in the preview screen. So if we select preview, we can see how our user will engage with the form as it displays on the app. The preview also is really functional for a first draft to make sure everything is flowing the way that you want it. And in this instance, I really don't like that each and every component has the display feature for the image upload and the comments. So I'm going to hide those functions unless there is a negative answer. So first thing I'm going to do is go into my image. I'm going to hide that. Then I'm going to access my conditional formatting tab. I'm going to tell this that I want a true display when our question has a result of fails. And we get our value again from the question itself under the data tab in our values table. So I'm recalling that information to position it into the conditional formatting. I'm going to do the same thing for the comments box. Click edit, hide this feature, go into our conditional formatting, set this component as true. This question, when answered as fails, I would like it to display. And of course, we can always test this in our preview feature before we save or publish to make sure that it's functioning the way we want. So we're going to select fails. We see that generates. That's exactly what we want it to do. It even tells us that this is required, which is also what we want it to. And from there, we can just move on to the next element. The last form element I want in here is a signature box. So I'm going to drag and drop that into the form builder. And there's not much you have to do here, but I do want it to be required. So I'm going to check that under validation and hit save. Once I know all my form components are in place and I've previewed it, I can publish it or save it as a draft. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Angelia Kelly at Federated or your regional safety and loss prevention consultant.